Now, I think a lot of you already know what this symbol stands for. Who doesn't understand the meaning of these pieces? All right, okay, about half. That's good. That's important for us to know. The G symbol is defined as standing for God, or the grand architect of the universe. Our friend here had a keychain at one point that had that, and I was like, because he's an architect, I was like, oh, dang, grand architect, interesting, interesting. That God, however, has Judeo-Christian origins, but it's not the God that you and I worship. It's a different God that is actually a synchronized God, brought of three different deities together, although I would generally call it Lucifer. Because it's very, it's got very demonic undertones. But it's not our Judeo-Christian God. That's the main point I want to make. When you draw something with a square, what shape does it make?
A square.
A square. Haha, genius. I'd be curious to know what the etymology of the word square is and where that comes from. When you draw something with a compass, which is what this is, a compass, what does that make?
Circle.
Circle. So we have we have the square and we have the circle. This shape here represents the finite, and it has edges to it, it has boundaries, right? The circle has always represented the infinite, the perfect, right? The ring is the everlasting. So this is the divine, and this is the finite, this is the human. And so they put the G symbol, very kind of funnily, symbolically, in between the finite and the infinite, in the middle, as a crossover, as we here on earth have the experience of the finite, yet we can somehow interact with the divine. There are also other symbols that relate to far many other things, including the apron, which I just discovered the other day, apparently is a reference back to Adam and Eve wearing fig leaves to cover themselves up. Because now they were in knowledge of their nakedness and ashamed, but they covered themselves up. And so the apron is actually a reference back symbolically to Adam and Eve's fig leaves. Again, the tool we use for all knowledge. I would love to study what the roots are of the word Googol, why they just created that. It seems to me like a pseudo-Wicca, witchcrafty, kind of like Google, like something you would say to summon something.
Actually, a Googol is an infinite number.
Ah, a Googol is an infinite number.
I can't remember. I can't remember.
Google, is in.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's infinite.
Interesting. Well, anyways, they put it in that perfect circle now when they did the redesign of that logo, and we'll get into some more of the other Google pieces that are modern day hints, but they also very interestingly have their geometry within that letter, just to, I think, point back a little bit. Some of the oldest proof of Freemasonry is found mainly in the United Kingdom in the 1600s and 1700s. And funnily enough, if you travel around the UK or the Netherlands, I've been to a couple different synagogues, Jewish synagogues. They have a surprising amount of connections to Freemasonic lodges. I don't know exactly what that's all about. Sometimes I think they use the same space, the same temple spaces and altars to do rituals, and they just alternate different days. Yeah, these are some of the oldest pieces, and they're mainly found in the United Kingdom. Here are some of the symbols of the lodge, which the word lodge is not a common word in our everyday language, but you could literally just Google Maps even right now, closest lodge near me, and find what those are. I think there's one in Carpentersville. Again, the Ville of Carpenters, I wonder if there's a connection there, right? Because they like bringing these pieces back to their local cities and governments. They put the arrangement of the temple hall has the Grand Master, the GM or whatever, at the top, and he's raised above three layers or steps to get to the top stage area, shall we call it, which is why I'm always kind of happy when I see churches that don't have 3 steps, because I'm like, good, that means they're not potentially practicing things here. Because those 3 steps represent the 3 degrees before you enter into being an actual Mason and you're part of the true brotherhood. That's like apprenticeship. That's your first initial degrees are called the Blue Lodge. And we have a couple books there that can detail that out. Both main lodge groups or denominations, shall we call it, if the main Christian ones are Catholic and Protestant, right, and everything goes from there.
Yeah.
The main Masonic ones are the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, right? So both of them, UK, Scotland, you can notice even that division. Scottish Rite, okay, so that probably had its roots in Scotland, and York Rite, England. So even though the UK was one unity, even in their religion, they wanted to keep those lodges separate, and they grew up separately. And the one lodge has, of the York Rite on the left, which has 13 degrees, and the Scottish Rite on the right has 33 degrees. And how do you look at it? Some of their symbols, their motto, are faith, hope, charity. You guys have heard of the Shriners Hospital. There's lots of these hospitals and things that they do advocate for and come together to bring lots of funds and money together that support research, hospitals, health, and yet I personally am slightly suspicious of how much of that money that goes to these major hospitals and Jesuit institutions even and so forth goes towards other places. Cancer research in and of itself, and AIDS, back in the day, AIDS and cancer was felt like limitless buckets of money could just keep coming for cancer research and AIDS research, on and on and on. How much more research do we need? What if there already was a cure? Would that then solve it? Oh, what if, I would personally lean towards, if you keep them sick, you can keep money flowing. But that's just some of that. Faith, hope, and charity. These are kind of like generic Judeo-Christian words, but specifically if you go to someone's house, like I have, who used to be a Mason, notice that the word Christ, or Jesus Christ, just like in our Constitution, you will not find the word Jesus or Jesus Christ anywhere, because even in their rituals and in their meetings, they have a Masonic Bible. It literally says Holy Bible on the side. But Jesus and Jesus Christ has been removed out of their translations of it, because they want to keep religion, politics, and a couple other things out of their meetings. But yet it specifically removes the whole point of why the Bible exists in the first place. It's the Old Testament to point to Jesus, and in the New Testament to reveal Jesus in his own words and beyond. It's a lot of faith, charity.
Look like Lord even as well.
Lord as well. Yeah. So they'll acknowledge Lord, but it kind of accommodates to the mainstream Christians out there who also believe in the Lord.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love the Lord. I love the Lord. Okay, which Lord are we talking about? This is an interesting little old snippet here that talks a little bit about some of the ritualistic stuff. The world is in pain, our secrets to gain, but still let them wonder and gaze on. They ne'er can divine a word or a sign of a free and accepted Mason. It is this and it is that, they cannot tell what, nor why the great men of the nation should put aprons on and make themselves one with the free and accepted Mason. It's an interesting little song that they chant together or something, I don't know. So, we have this interesting period of, after fighting, the Christians taking kind of a dominant stage across Europe and even into the New World, right? As these colonies expand out into Africa and into Central, South, and North America. We have the birth of the United States of America separating itself from the UK. Here is that Bible I was mentioning. That's a Masonic Bible. Notice they have the square and the compass sitting on top. Just like the Jews use, I forget what it's called. Is it a scepter? Or I forget the pointing hand that they use to read the holy words in the Torah. They have, I don't know if they use it to read or whatever, but they have their own instruments that are derived. Notice here also the checkerboard floor, which is part of why I brought this out, and that's what this previous slide refers to, is that when they bring a new apprentice into the room of Masons, and all the other men are sitting around, that new apprentice is at one point blindfolded. There's a whole series of ceremonies that book and some of these other books talk about in a deeper length that are kind of disturbing at one point. But he's blindfolded symbolically, which is why you'll see this in a lot of music videos where they intentionally remove someone's sight and then they give them the sight back to imply that his eyes have now seen the light, that he is now able to understand all things and start working his way up as an apprentice Mason within the lodge. And then he goes through those degrees. And the tricky thing about this is that you don't know what you're signing up for until you're in it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, just like you and I, who maybe get grandfathered into it, maybe it's a father, an uncle, says, hey, let's go to this meeting, let's go to this thing. My uncle personally, he at one point told me he was, as a teenager, at the Demolay. It's a group, the Knights of Demolay is a boys' fraternity. There's also girls' sororities. These groups that are in elementary school, that are at churches and other places, that at young ages start getting young people involved in Masonic, pseudo-Masonic traditions and rituals so that they're ready by the time they go to college and they pick a college. And all the colleges have fraternities and sororities. Now you're part of it, you already understand, we do these funny rituals, we get blindfolded, we do some oath kind of thing to the lodge, whatever. Now, when they're adults, easy picking, and we can find which ones are the star students, and we can bring them on board into our fraternity. Sorry, it's a lot. So again, here's the Constitution, and 1776. I personally, I don't know full evidence on this, but the original 13 colonies, right, 13 states, I wonder if that number was an intentional choice that they wanted to have 13, which is kind of a pseudo-Christian, anti-Christian jab at the 12 disciples. But who was the 13th disciple? Judas, right? So he kind of, within Satanism, he kind of became, that number kind of became famous. I'm curious how much, even today, with our new current flag, we have the 13 stripes. So here was 13, double 13. I don't know whether that was intentional or not. Some of this is kind of like, they leave it a mystery for the future, right? They kind of leave it hidden in plain sight, but we don't know. And they kind of do that intentionally. Here's the new flag. Here is kind of as you're going into the late 1700s and 1800s, people are starting their own lodges across America. Missouri, Oklahoma.
Judas was actually one of the 12, actually.
Right, one of the 12, but
Yeah.
then he got replaced.
They kicked
Oh.
him out. They replaced him.
Yeah, okay, so then he became the 13th.
So then they kind of see him as 13. Yeah. Here we have the pillars, and all these pieces come back to biblical stories. Again, they don't call themselves a religion, but they are a religion. They pull from mainly the Old Testament for their symbolism, and in particular King Solomon. And with the Crusades, all those Europeans going out to Israel, they were there to raid ultimately Solomon's temple and steal whatever was inside and take it back. And I don't know if they put it in the Vatican in some spot there or whatever. But these are the pillars of Joachim and Boaz, which is again a biblical thing that the Bible specifically mentions 2 pillars at the front of the temple, one representing the male and the sun, and the other representing the female, the feminine, and the moon. Okay, and so this is where other symbolism of the polarities come to play, even to a certain extent with the scroll. There we go, here. The Torah, even, I'm not sure how much this is a true symbolism, is a storyline that you're following between two pillars. And so the whole storyline is that in between the two pillars, sorry, I even forgot to mention about the checkerboard, when that apprentice shows up on that lodge floor, they will be led across step after step after step across the edge of the perimeter of that floor, to symbolize that this is the journey of life. And yet it is between polarities of life and death, good and bad, and that's what the black and white represents. And so, as you enter between it, you see in architecture, you see lots of temples and formal buildings that have these big giant columns on either side with ornate decorations. One of them might represent the feminine side, and the other might represent the masculine side. As you enter into that door between those two pillars, which is what I think even the Twin Towers relates to a little bit, you are entering into the journey between the masculine and the feminine. Again, it comes back to between the divine and the finite, sort of a symbolism. Here they even read the journey of the Jews on the pages between the two pillars. Yeah. So now we get to the birth of America, right? The Statue of Liberty was donated by the French. It's the French flag. And it was here. A supposed gift of the French to commemorate the Franco-American Union. Notice the French also based their declaration of independence, what's it called?
It's like their liberation. It was the French Revolution.
Their constitution. Their constitution on the American one, right? There's this strong connection between the French and the Americans, especially after the Americans just defeated and wanted to separate from the British. Who also didn't like the British, the French. I noticed an intense effort on the part of the Masons to raise funds for its restoration. In checking further, I discovered that its sculptor was the French Freemason, Frederick A. Bartholdi. It was financed through Masonic efforts and dedicated by the Paris Lodge, Sac-Laurent, Bartholdi's home lodge, a gift from the French Masons to their American brothers. It was received and its cornerstone laid on August 5th of 1884 by the Grand Lodge of New York, which lodge also recently rededicated the restored Lady of the Harbor. A curious piece of the Masonic conspiracy puzzle in the founding of America is the actual street layout of Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So you guys know about this one as well, right? The Novus Ordo Seclorum, or the New World Order, or the New Way of Order for the world. And at the bottom that number represents 1776. If you add it up, I believe there's 13 layers of bricks representing the 13 founding colonies or whatever, and so forth. The all-seeing eye, that also represents the G symbol, God, at the same time, which has Egyptian connections to the occult.
Really?
Again, in God we trust? Yeah, sure. What God are we talking about here? Washington, D.C. This book, Washington, D.C. did not formally exist. Here, feel free to pass around this book as you go. Pass it backwards. They decided where to plant the capital. Who knows where the former capital of the United States was before Washington, D.C.?
Oh my goodness.
I personally don't know exactly.
Pennsylvania.
I thought it was either Pittsburgh or Philadelphia.
Yeah, Philadelphia, maybe.
Philadelphia sounds right.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the word Philadelphia
Brotherly love.
is the city of brotherly love.
Oh,
The Masons
nice.
love it, man. They're like, yes.
What the heck? This is all coming together.
Which, if y'all ever seen National Treasure, have you watched National Treasure? Oh, rewatch that thing now with this lens on,
Oh my
and
god.
you'll be like, oh, dang, they're really trying. Constitution, they love celebrating the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, da 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 da. Which I don't entirely dismay, but just take what you know with it to look at this under new eyes. If you look on your phone, Google Maps, the city of DC, I'm not sure if they included this as well, but at least this portion on the Maryland side is based on a diamond, right? As is above, so is below. It's the G symbol, the compass, and the square. And so they made it perfectly square, and then put the beautiful downtown city right there on the river, after it was formerly, I believe, in Philadelphia. And so they decided, they handpicked it themselves for this location. The gentleman who was the architect and planner was, again, a Frenchman, Pierre Charles L'Enfant. And he, along with Jefferson and Washington, I believe, helped come up with the plan. In this book, there's a chapter at one point that mentions that there's lots of sacred geometry that wasn't entirely Masonic. Lots of places and cultures all around the world, including the Arabs and Chinese, and no matter who was studying math, they were coming up with these same ratios. They were coming up with the golden ratio and these mathematical equations that Pythagoras in Greece and all these people were also coming up with. And so some of it, he'll argue, is not necessarily connected. It's not. But if you study into what his role was and how the brothers of the founding fathers were guiding America slowly, you'll realize that this was truly intentional and not just some happenstance, oh, let's just do some cool geometry. They were in the Enlightenment era where they were like, we have principles. This is the new world. This is the new place. We're going to construct a city that is based on the principles and mathematical geometries that we've come across in old ancient times. And so the new order of ages was meant to, their capital city, be based on this sort of sacred geometry. If you look into it and you study it a little bit more, you realize that the streetscape of Washington D.C. is built on this sort of mathematical system with the pentagram star at the top. That's the Capitol, and then the White House is like one of those other ones.
Yeah, White House is above it.
Yeah, there's no way the White House would be on the National Mall like that.
Yeah, it's on north.
It's Abraham Lincoln over here,
Yeah.
and then you have the entire National Mall, and then the Capitol building right there. Of course, the Capitol, you see that owl shape? That's also what I would believe. The gardens are shaped in the shape of an owl to represent the all-seeing. The owl is known for what? Wisdom, and being able to look at all degrees. And so the owl is sitting at the top here of this design even. I believe even within that star, but I'd have to go into the specifics more, but this book really details it out in a very fascinating manner. When they founded Washington, D.C. and they built this new city from the ground up, George Washington was there at the ceremony in 1793 to help lay the Masonic ceremony of the cornerstone. The Capitol is in progression. The southeast is yet kept vacant, that the cornerstone is to be laid with the assistance of the Brotherhood on the 18th. Those of the craft, however, dispersed are requested to join the work. The solemnity is expected to equal the occasion. So even in one of these detailed, beautiful doors, you'll see here in the top left, one of those pieces is George Washington with his gavel, or with his, what is that, spade? That you can clear the mortar with and shape it around. A trout. Again, these trowel, sorry. Trout. Go fishing. They have this ceremony in which they want to imply that this initial cornerstone, this initial foundation piece that's going to set the foundation for the rest of this building and this structure is tried and true, that it is good, that it is found to be in good standing, and they have this whole ritual upon which they want to ensure, yes, the builders of this structure have indeed found it to be good. We can commence forward with the planning and building of our structure. They do this in symbolism as to the creation and building of our own lives. And they say, we ourselves, just like a building, just like a structure, are the masons of our own lives. And we must build ourselves spiritually to the extent that that God has equipped us to be able to do so. And that's what all those degrees are for, is to get someone supposedly to level up into the purest form of humanity. This is our modern day equivalent of this exact occurrence. Just 5 years ago, in 2018, I so happened to be looking around on YouTube, and I saw from C-SPAN, the U.S. Capitol Cornerstone 225th anniversary. And I was like, you're bloody kidding me. This is ridiculous. This is insane. And so here you have none others than those that are truly ruling us and helping us move forward in the direction that America is meant to go. Richard Bautista, Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, Grand Master. And you can tell nowadays it's a mix of people. It's not just white dudes. He's Latino. We've got our African-American brother over here. It's a whole range of things. And we'll get into some of that diversity more in a second. But they were celebrating and rededicating on the 225th anniversary since 1793 from the original presentation. You'll notice here the aprons. His is all decorative. Remember what a mayor of a town wears. He wears that same kind of a piece, or a necklace piece around his neck, and that helps distinguish him as separate from the crowd. Going back to the diversity piece, I am coming to strongly believe that the emancipation and civil rights movement for African American individuals in America is strongly connected to Black people being able to practice Freemasonry. So, Prince Hall was a leader in the free Black community in Boston. He founded Prince Hall Freemasonry and lobbied for education rights for African American children. He was also active in the Back to Africa movement. I don't know what that is, but that sounds interesting too. Notice, born in Barbados, died in Boston, Massachusetts. Prince Hall is the branch of Freemasonry that then was Blacks only. Let that sit in. When I first discovered that, I was like, you're bloody kidding me. That's how deep this thing is in our culture, in our country. These are the Scottish Rite here, Scottish Rite, 33, and then the 13, the York Rite on the right. And each of them, for some whatever reason, have their own ways of going up the ladder. Here are the first 3 steps, right, of the Blue Lodge. So this fellow of the craft, I believe, Master Mason is the 3rd degree, and then once you go past that, now you can go into some of these others. But I believe that it's unison for both Scottish and York Rite that you can go into. Don't do it though. Again, here, the pillars on either side, regardless of what it is, they mainly want people who want to be members to be of monotheistic beliefs. So if someone's a Hindu and they believe in poly gods, they would probably ask that person would just believe in one god before entering, even though the one that they worship is also kind of this. It's called Jahbulon, and it's a collective of 3 different gods, including Baal and all these other ones. But Moloch, yeah, something like that. This is again Prince Hall. Martin Luther King Jr., fascinating. He never was a Mason, but the Masons wanted to get him in and wanted to make sure he was one of them. In this article, they said that they wanted to call him a Mason at sight, which is a non-Freemason raised to the degree of Master Mason through the authority of a Grand Master, who says simply, you know what, boom, this person is a Mason. So they wanted his title, his status, everything that he did to be part of one of which, for all the centuries to come, they could say, yes, he was a Mason. But he wasn't. The news of King's alleged appointment to Master Mason after death caused controversy in the Masonic world, primarily because a dead person is not able to exercise one of the primary tenets of Freemasonry, which is joining of one's own free will. To become a Freemason, aspirants typically must go through a process by which they attain the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry. First, candidates are initiated and are known as entered apprentices. During this stage, they learn some of the secrets of Freemasonry, and upon completion are entitled to be called a brother. So, this is him speaking at a local Prince Hall gathering as Reverend Dr. King. So he spoke to them and was able to be within those circles, but he never was a Mason. Muhammad Ali, however, famous figure, he was part of something called the Nation of Islam, NOI, and then later started his own chain. He started his own direction, his own religion, basically, called the Fruit of Islam, FOI. And this is him seen as at one of his gatherings. Just alone within each state, when I lived in Montana, I was like, there's literally only 1 million people that live in this state. I can't believe that Masonry really made its foothold here in this state. Oh, guess what? This is a map of all the Freemasonic lodges in Montana. There's a lot. If you find a church in any town, there's probably a lodge in that town or a town right next to it that matches that. Sometimes even churches offer these services towards their teenagers in groups. You call it women's auxiliary, even if it's to a certain degree, I would argue YMCA, YWCA.
Is Rotary Club also?
Rotary Club has Masonic ties,
Okay.
Lions Club, you name it. A lot of these groups have these fraternal, especially if it's military, Navy, Army, any of the Marines, any of the groups that went off to fight in the Second World War, when they came back to the US, they wanted a place to still have that oath and brotherhood together with their boys. And so that's where they created these VFW gathering places, lodges, Elks Lodge down the street here, yada, yada, yada. Here's another family tree with all that stuff. I'm not gonna bore you with it too much. Ladies organizations, wow, they left a couple for the ladies, look at that.
So happy.
Order of the Eastern Star, Ladies of the Shrine, whatever, goes on. Mormonism, I won't get into any other crazy, believe it or not, this is the shrunken down version. I won't go into crazy other Judeo-Christian occults or beliefs, but Mormonism I want to mention real quick. I think it's Joseph, what is his name originally?
Smith.
Joseph Smith. Originally went to a lodge, I believe in Ohio. And in the founding documents, I have a Book of Mormon right here. That y'all could again pass around if you want. I took this from, Marriott Hotels. It's a Mormon-owned business. In Ether, chapter 8, verse 14, you'll notice some distinct Masonic kind of language. Yeah, and it came to pass that they all swear unto him by the God of heaven, and also by the heavens, and also by the earth, and by their heads, that whoso should vary from the assistance which Achish desired should lose his head, and whoso should divulge whatsoever thing Achish made known unto them, the same should lose his life. So some of these Masonic rituals and beliefs are bleeding into other Judeo-Christian cults that we find ourselves interacting with today. Again, this tree just keeps spreading. This is kind of just plucked off of the internet. But the Bilderberg Group, Rothschilds, the oil magnates of America, Rockefellers, the UN. This one I looked up the other day, oikumene. This is a joint gathering of the churches of the world under one branch. And they want to basically slowly bring out the Zionistic Judeo-Christian narrative into the world, but have it done so uniformly under one group.
What about is this communists and also like anarchists?
I was looking at this the other day. Some of this is which one?
Batman.
The Batman Club? Is that what you
I don't know what some of these are, honestly, but I can imagine there being branches of this within communist realms as well. Yeah. UNESCO. This is a quick video, so you don't need to hear me talking, of Prince Charles becoming prince.
Who was fulfilling a promise and giving Wales a worthy prince for its own, in a manner set down centuries ago.
there's a degree of searching for his own identity and trying to escape from the preordained formats.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship.
Your liege man of life and limb. The tradition of having a monarchy and having this power that represents the King Solomon goes again back to the Bible. The idea of a king and a queen, my country, the Netherlands, has a king and a queen now. US, when they founded it, doesn't have that. Because they were like, we won't need that, we'll replace that fake power puppet figure with a president. And it's gonna seem way more democratic, because everyone in the past kind of hates the queen and the king and King Henry, King Charles, and Queen Elizabeth, yada, yada, yada. But the reason why they do this, in the way, there's a whole bunch of different reasons, but to me, one, it represents a Masonic reference back to King Solomon and that kingdom that they want to create here on earth in reclaiming Israel and fulfilling the Bible through Revelation, right? And the rebuilding of the third temple to fulfill Revelation and Daniel. But also, if you have people wearing this kind of stuff with all the wealth, and it's just bloodline related, just like the Bible was bloodline, then we as normal peasant humans see that and say internally, they are the ones who have authority over us. They are the ones who have power over us, even though they're just humans. They're just like you and me, simple, plain humans. But because of all the cultural symbols that they drench this in, and the wording, and the Lord of Life and Limb, or Duke of Wells, and Duke of this, and Lady of the whatever shrine, they make us as regular humans, even with people adding letters to the back of their name, and they add more letters and more letters. Doctor, degree, master's degree. These are Masonic lingo pieces that help place authority and hierarchy within society. And so it helps to rule the young sheep to have people who look the part of the authoritarian figures. So again, here's the beautiful royal family tree and how that's all playing out. And oh boy, you can imagine the amount of fraternal Masonic gatherings and groups that they're all a part of. But that's just a pure clip there about the king, right? So now we have the birth of America, right? And this new country in which we can finally Novo Ordo Seclorum build up the values that the Bible has foretold and predicted. And this country is the one that's going to help fulfill them in Israel. World War II and World War I, again, not surprisingly, World War II was all about which people group?
The Jews.
Yes. Yeah, the Jews, right? But the Nazis is the people who executed them.
Yes.
Fascinating. I would like to study more about why Hitler specifically was obsessed with the Jews. Of course, there were other minority groups of people who sadly were also killed. But by the time World War II had ended, millions of people had perished, 6, 7 million. Everyone who was different, everyone who spoke up, had been murdered. The ultimate scapegoat, the Jewish people, had been sacrificed willingly and knowingly in order to take control of Israel. From that moment on, the Zionists took over. The Palestinian people who had lived in Israel since the beginning of time were subdued in yet another war. So, with Hitler, we know that he claimed that he was ridiculed at times for saying that they were Christian. Germans were Lutheran and Protestant, right? They invented the Protestant Reformation with Martin Luther originally in, I think, 1517, which is why 500 years later, in 2017, we had the 500-year celebration of the Reformation. But 1517, Reformation. Germans are Christian. They see themselves as Christian. So you imagine, why on earth would a Christian country help execute 6 to 7 million Jews? Hitler argued away the idea that Jesus was Jewish. They swept that under the table. People say, hey, whoa, we're following Jesus here. He's a Jew. And Hitler dismissed that and said that that the Jews were the cause of the ones killing Jesus, right? Because it wasn't the Romans, they just simply did the dirty work. The Jews were the ones asking for it. And so Hitler was able to place a lot of blame within society on some of this ideology that local Christians had. Also, the way I'm talking today about Zionism, they were talking about the rich bankers, right? The rich Jewish bankers and all this kind of thing. And drummed that up to be highly anti-Semitic. But behind the scenes, I personally wonder how much of this fits in with a broader European Zionist agenda to ultimately, if the same way we did 9/11 and we had an excuse now to go invade the Middle East, if Hitler had, what if the Bible says there was a big diaspora of the Jews, right? They're going to be scattered from their homeland to all across the world. They were in Europe. My hometown of Amsterdam we call Mokum because it is the city that is, in Hebrew it means home. And so the Jewish people, when we go to our soccer games in Ajax Amsterdam, sorry it's taking a little bit longer, we say, sometimes they chant Jews, 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 Yoda, 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 as a way to encourage our team, because that was how much the Jews were prevalent within the city of Amsterdam and within the Netherlands, which is why the Nazis targeted our country so much.
Interesting.
Once the Jews are scattered everywhere, what would be a socially acceptable reason to then all of a sudden bring them back to Israel? What on earth? Well, what if there was a mass tragedy that happened to them that brought them close to extinction, and that gave us culturally an excuse to then create their rightfully earned and deserved homeland in the Middle East? That is how I would argue, and I would like to research it more at some point, but not too much because you'll go crazy. That is how I believe they then decided, right? Second World War ends with Allied forces defeating Germany, but in 1946, guess who shows up at the doorstep of Palestine to introduce a new country? It's all the forces that believe in these Masonic Zionistic values to bring a state of Israel. Right, this is the Jewish land, and there's some Jews that still live there back in the day. But this conversation is obviously very relevant today. Gaza, right, the Gaza Strip. And slowly over time, the Allied forces, so United Kingdom, US, United Nations, which was also formed just after the end of the Second World War, EU later, and NATO, then brought about the formation of the State of Israel to then intentionally say, look, Second World War just happened, 6 million, 7 million Jews just got killed. Now's the time for a homeland.
So this is, see this? This is a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews in Europe. They've been like, I have never seen a minority being kicked around this much, right? And of course, this comes back to the, the whole idea about the original sin, that you have betrayed Jesus Christ. The blood of Jesus is on your hand. And then comes the 11th century. At that time, Jewish people were not allowed to own land. They were just peasants. Even some of the professions they were not even allowed to participate in. But they were allowed to do one thing, usury, money lending, because it was prohibited by the Catholic Church to engage into that. So what happens when you work in money? You get richer, right? And those Jews lived in ghettos. Now, ghettos was not just like isolated neighborhoods in cities. Sometimes ghettos were outside the city. This is like how isolated they were. And in those ghettos, they have to pay gold to the mayor or the governor or the prince or the noble. So they would see, you're getting richer. I need more taxes. So they pay tax. What happens when you have a business and they increase your rent? You increase your service, increase the taxes, increase the... So what happened? The Christians started to default. And suddenly, the image of the greedy Jew was created. Shylock, Merchant of Venice. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. Like never did I see a creature so confound of a man. English. I messed it up. Anyways, but this was the image Greedy Jew, the greedy Jew. This was created because of their conditions. And it became worse in 1095, when Pope Urban II called for the first crusade to go and save the birth of Jesus from the unbelievers Muslim. And you know, this crusade did not kill a single Muslim. You know how many people they killed? 2,000 Jews. Because it's like, wait, the non-believers are all over there. Why? So they went to it's called the Crusades of the Rhineland. So they went to the Jewish community because, hey, we own the money, so let's kill them better than paying them. And then came the plague. And then all of the things like, oh, they're killing babies, who would do that to a baby, you know? And they accused them of poisoning the well. This was the kind of oppression that the Jewish people went through. Fast forward 19th century, there was like the Eastern Jew in Ukraine and Russia, and there was the Western Jews in Europe. Those people in the Eastern Jews had to immigrate because there were pogroms and they were like, you know, kicked out. And at a certain point, the people in the West, especially in England, it's like, there are too many Jews. We need a solution. A solution for what? For the Jewish problem. So it's like we need to get rid of them. And you know what? Palestine was not even in the A list. Palestine was in the B list. Because England proposed 6,000 square miles in Uganda for the Jews, 1903. And the reason why Palestine was not on the list, that it was objected by a lot of rabbis that said, like, it's a promised land, but only when the Messiah comes. But there were other options: Argentina, South Africa, Uganda, Madagascar. And eventually they said, all right, let's do Palestine. So they went to Palestine in 1914. There was 700,000 people living in Palestine, 3% were Jewish. 1917, Balfour Declaration. Arthur Balfour, he called the Jewish people in England that they are alien and hostile race. And the thing is, the only Jewish member of the parliament, of the English parliament, Lord Montagu, he objects, like, these are British citizens, we should not kick them out. So they pushed them, but it was not going fast enough. Came the Nazis. And then it was not about the solution anymore. It was the end losing, the final solution by Hitler, because he needed an answer for the Jewish question, the Judefrage. And then, as you see, the Holocaust happened, the most orchestrated, industrialized, horrible genocide in our modern time. 6 million Jews died. So it accelerated, and they went. First of all, they left Eastern Europe, and they went to West Europe, and they went to America, and they were turned down, and they were pushed towards Palestine. So by 1948, right before the declaration of the State of Israel, there were 2 million people living there. Only 30% of them was Jews. So the whole idea of like a land without a people to a people without a land was a marketing thing. They were already Palestinians. So suddenly, from our perspective, the Jewish problem is not a Jewish problem, is not a Middle Eastern problem, is not an Arab problem, it is a European problem. It was pushed on us together with the guilt, because now we are the anti-Semite. Now we are the Jewish hater. And not just that, they took land. So people look at this like, why are we even, we had a lot of refugees coming in. And during that, there was a lot of, as you know, Zionist militia, the Aragon, the Haganah, all of these people were killing Palestinians. The famous massacre of Deir Yassin. You're talking about the atrocities of October 7th, it's horrible. But in the Arab mind, there is Deir Yassin, where there is an incredible movie called Tantoura, Tantoura, where the Israeli members of those militias, they talk about the atrocities that they did, including opening up the pregnant women's bellies and having bets if the boy inside is a boy or a girl. It is one of the most horrific, and they talk about it, some talk about with regret, and some talk about with pleasure. We did that, right? So you have even King David. I think your Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak, was there. And if I was British, I would question this. Because as you know, King David was bombed by the Aragon militias. 91 British soldiers died. I don't know, if I was British, how come my Prime Minister would have the nerve to stay in that hotel? I mean, you know, the ghost of the 91 British soldiers, that must be haunting for them, you see? So when you see all of that, and you see that suddenly, overnight, 1948, there were 1.5 million Palestinians, half of them, 3/4 of them were overnight pushed into refugees. Yeah. And this is why it's called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So now we have all of this building up into the minds. And suddenly this was like a conflict, a hate, a problem that we didn't have to do anything with. This was basically pushed on us by the Europeans. You see, this is why it is important to say that. And I'm not saying that just like, oh, let's wipe out the state of Israel, let's like push them in the sea. No, but it's important when you talk about the conflict that you talk about the root causes, right? No, there was like a vibrant Palestinian culture happening over there. And right now they are erasing this culture. Suddenly I'm thinking of like Israeli feta cheese. Israeli hummus. Oh, that's an insult. Israeli hummus. Come on. I mean, take the land, but leave the hummus, man. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not fair. You are someone who's always spoken against culture, cancel culture. Right now, a whole culture is canceled.
On a symbolic note, however, if we go ask who was, oh jeez, don't do this. Who was the 33rd president of the United States? LMGFY. Let me Google that for you. The 33rd president of the United States was Harry Truman. And Harry Truman was president of the United States serving from 1945 to 1953. To me, it's kind of interesting on a symbolic level. Remember our degrees, the 13 and the 33? The 33rd president of the United States was the one who brought about the formation of the state of Israel in the homeland. So for them, the symbolism, they're just like chucking on it. Yes, this is perfect. Because number 33, he's reached peak Masonry. Also, this guy is from Missouri, and this is him writing letters back to his lodge in Missouri. And there's a bunch of lodges in Missouri that are dedicated to Harry Truman. Some more garb thing of famous leaders, Karl Marx, Stalin, Napoleon, who had some of these,
Masonry?
Masonic, yeah, this is Masonic lingo. I'm not sure what branches Stalin and Marx would have been, but this is kind of the signs of the day that just help imply that power position. This is a piece that I'd like to research more myself too.
What the heck is with these?
But within academia, that is in Judeo-Christian institutions historically, because the Christians were the ones who helped build hospitals and build universities and build all these places of education. But we also brought the Masonic stuff into it, into our degrees, and to the robes, and to the meanings of the different linings, and yada, 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 yada. I even wonder, have you ever wondered why the heck is it a freaking square on top of that little cap? Okay, a square and then a circle. I don't know, but that's some stuff I'd like to research more. This is someone in a stonemason's guild or something that has the ecclesiastical gown, which is church, the master's gown, the city company gown, and the doctorate gown. And each of them have a certain meaning, velvet, lining, you know, whatever, the shell. I honestly don't like it too much. Whatever, you know, if it talks like, breathes like, smells like, it probably is. Even though a lot of us don't know that, so we don't use it that way. So 2017, here we're going to wrap up here soon. The oldest lodge, we saw a picture of it earlier, in London, the United Grand Lodge of England, or Googol, as they call it, Googol, had this big ceremony. Here is the Duke of Kent. I think it's Edwin or Charles or someone, about to go through this ceremony. The unveiling of these paving stones that are underneath there that help commemorate the 300 years since that first Grand Lodge in London was built and dedicated. Also, by the way, if you look at the floor plan of this whole thing, it is one big Masonic logo, the whole giant building. It's crazy.
It's only been around for 300 years.
And it's been around for 300 years. This was, again, in the MissouriIssue.com magazine, they were talking about one of their members, their probably Grand Master, went to London to be part of all the delegates in that giant hall to represent all the head Masons of each of the lodges around the world, or around the Western world, to be there. And this is the Duke of Kent right there in the middle, who's high up in the ranks for the United Kingdom. Here, this is, if you look, Google Masonic Lodge near me, you'll find all these kinds of strange individuals and groups. And the weird thing is that it's people that you run into every single day. When you look at bumper stickers, I'll text you, I see another bumper sticker, or some guy, or some license plate. And now that you see this, you'll start seeing it in more and more places around you. And you notice what kind of car they drive? Oh my gosh, these are some nice, expensive cars. They're just driving up and down these streets, casually promoting their little Freemasonic beliefs. Here's the Google piece, right? Gmail. Oh man. Oh, that's a killer.
Wait. The right, is that Photoshop?
This?
Yeah.
No, this is real, my friend.
No.
Yes, look it up.
Get out.
This is in one of the particular branches of Freemasonry. This is their distinct type of apron that they wear. And we had it as a Gmail logo for a while. Even in Flintstones, I was doing a casual design project the other day, and you know what? In the Flintstone, they have the Water Buffalo Lodge. Because back in the 1960s and 1970s, what were a lot of these men involved with? Well, if you look at some of the episodes with the lodge, the women in one of the episodes tried to fake being a guy so that they could get into the lodge. And they wear mustaches and all this. It's ridiculous. Also, there's some really weird sexual stuff. Snapchat recently did this thing for Phantom House they're promoting. Look at this imagery. What is that? Now that you know some of the Masonic symbolism. Okay, so we have the two columns or the two sidings, and then they don't have a black and white checkerboard, but they decided to make it a little more cool, a little more trendy. It's like this zebra pattern, black and white thing. Okay, it looks very dark. It looks very demonic, and it's got nothing but Masonic symbolism. And so, yeah, you know, Jay-Z, and you got all these artists and rappers and musicians out there that perpetuate the industry that is selling sex, drugs, and rock and roll to the people. In light of all this stuff, you have to be very careful with how you deal with these conversations around you. I was very daring in trying to find a former Freemason and interview him and put him out on the public, but there are lots of people that were really engaging with it, and there's so many people that need to hear these conversations, because if you're Caucasian descent in this country, you go back 1 or 2 generations, I pretty much 95% guarantee you go back a couple generations, you will find people who had Masonic connections at some point. Now, of course, the more you keep digging for something, the more likely you're going to find it. So don't dig so far that you lose your mind in this stuff. And then you have people reaching out to you with this Instagram stuff, and they're trying to get you to be a part of some Bitcoin Illuminati Brotherhood or something. It goes really weird. I block them all the time. I'm spam. I'm like blocking them. But yeah, use. What is it?
The third post. What the heck?
It's like a senior
Family
video or
Christmas.
something.
No, it's just some like.
Pastor.
And the Christmas pastor.
Yeah, man, it's some weird stuff. So here we go. Let's wrap this thing up. 2001 happened. 9/11. Okay, you can think about whoever you want, but I believe it was an inside job, allowing us to go to the Middle East, right? And now we know everyone knows all the oil, Middle East. COVID, 2020, another major event that has divided the world, but I believe in Masonic tradition is allowing experimentation for massive population control, just like China already has its credit score rating system.
No.
This is a famous little segment from Kanye. I don't want to call it out too much because I feel like this is slightly dangerous, honestly. But in this thing that he was showing, he was talking about about Hollywood. How many have seen this thing before? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So this is this is Kanye talking about who within the higher up positions within Hollywood were of Jewish connection or belief. And everything that's read in this Excel document was like Jewish names compared to the ones that were like, I don't know, Christian or other. So he's talking about how Zionism and Judaism within Hollywood, within America, has really, really taken over and trying to make the whole world aware of that in a rather striking, odd way, whatever you may think of him. I don't endorse anti-Semitism, obviously. People who are Jewish and practice Judaism is different from those who practice Zionism. And that's where I think we need to distinguish the difference between the two. However, it didn't start with gas chambers, right? Germany. It started with one party controlling the media, or in America. This is for America. One party controlling the message. One party deciding what is truth. One party censoring speech and silencing opposition. One party dividing citizens into us and them and calling on their supporters to harass them. It started when good people turned a blind eye and let it happen. And so what we notice today, more and more so, is a culture in which we're becoming highly divided, left and right. Are you pro-abortion? Are you anti? Are you pro this, anti that? To the point where I had a comment from a professor here at Judson the other day. He said, back in the day, we had 80% of people were in the middle, were in the center. And they had just decent understandings in the center. And then you had a couple outliers, 10% on the left and 10% on the right. They were kind of extremists. 80% was in the middle, just kind of, we have common ground understandings. Nowadays, we have like 40% on the right, 40% on the left, and like 20% maybe in the middle, barely. And that is what our culture is slowly, they're pushing us towards. Because if you have two opposing forces, that sells. People will talk about it. Are you Coca-Cola or Pepsi? Josh, do you like Coke products better or Pepsi products? Why? They're more popular. Interesting. Do you think a Coke tastes different from a Pepsi?
Yes.
Really? I would say you're being brainwashed. Because they really taste the same. And if you look at the ingredients, it's literally like 95% the exact same thing. Even for a Sprite compared to a ginger ale, if you look at the difference in ingredients, the only thing they add is a color and one flavor additive. And it's the same product. You're selling Sprite with 2 other E numbers, and that's it. It's genius because you sell tons of it, and it's super cheap to sell and make, and it's just a syrup, boom. Ginger ale, we have a whole new product, boom, done. So, oh, next time I'll vote Republican. Oh man, next time I'll vote Democrat, right? You'll constantly have people between two sides thinking, oh man, if only I would have done that. Oh, if only I would have voted this way. Well, you know what? At the end of the day, the agenda that's being pushed forward is going to be the same agenda no matter which color the ship is going towards Zionism, which is where we come to today.
Unfortunately, I think this is just the beginning. So I've learned when people tell you what they're going to do, don't ignore them. So when the UN and Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab tell you that they've got a UN 2030 plan with sustainable development goals, I think there are 17 or 21 of them, and every one of them says you won't be traveling, you won't have a private car, we won't be using international shipping to move goods around, there won't be any flights except military or perhaps very rich people. You won't own anything and you'll be happy. You probably won't live in your own house. You'll be using much less energy for everything, including heating, manufactured goods, and so on. When they tell you that, you should assume that they're serious about it. And so I think COVID has been part one of a multi-act play that's going to take 10 years that will destroy the liberal democracies completely. We've already, if you think living in a democracy, now ask yourself who you could vote for that would change this, because I don't think there's anyone you can vote for anywhere that is guaranteed things. So I don't have an answer, but I'm telling you, I think we're sliding down through the gates of hell. I'm speaking out. There's nothing in it for me. I've lost lots of money, all my friends. I'm away from my home and family, and I'm speaking out because as I close, I am absolutely sure what I've told you is substantially true.
Israel, Palestine, all the countries in the West have been siding publicly, at least, with Israel. All the countries, Middle East, Muslim descent, again, goes back to our verses in Genesis about the 2 nations, have been siding with Palestine, free Palestine, right? The flag even of Israel, we call it the Star of David, is a Zionistic Masonic creation that was created when the state of Israel was born after the Second World War. People say it's the Star of David and has connections all the way back to David. I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. You show me where an inverted triangle and an upside triangle is sure, there might be like some Solomon's Temple kind of stuff, but it really is a Judeo-occultic kind of a symbol that then was introduced as the entire flag and symbol for Judaism at large. So, with all this being said, remember, knowledge is power, or knowledge from God is also power from God, right? It's not our own knowledge, it's not our own power. Remember the apple. We bit the fruit out of disobedience, and therefore what happened happened. And here we are living with the knowledge that we've been given, and I'm hopefully empowering you with it as well, to hopefully do wisely with it. Because, you have, knowledge truly is power, and once you know certain things, you know how to be able to operate in wisdom with that. So, to conclude, what are you going to do with your knowledge today? In this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. The Bible describes earth being ruled by a devil, as we even come together on Halloween to discuss this. But yet Christ has already overcome the world no matter what happens. Thank you for your precious time. This has been the Untold History of America.